Well, when you've got systemic oppression, African Americans suffering through slavery and Jim Crow and all the continuing systemic oppression, and Asian Americans and all of the struggles that we've had over the last 18 months, it's easy to begin to just say nothing's going to change and to begin to despair of anything. I've been saying that for the last 18 months, everybody I know, including our organizations and our businesses, our culture, our politics, we've been suffering what I call an imagination deficit disorder. We just can't imagine that things are going to be really different in any profound or significant way. And so we find ourselves bewildered, and we find ourselves just kind of hunkering down and trying to survive. And yet when you get into that mode, nothing good tends to happen. The most frequently cited passage in the entire Bible is one version or another of "be not afraid." Because fear is what undermines any sense of imagination. What you really want is that imagination that calls you out of yourself to dream dreams that you might not otherwise have dreamed. So it's that sense that when the Israelites get refocused on God, and that God can actually do things that we might not be able to do, they no longer want to go back to Egypt, because now they can dream dreams and can imagine possibilities that are far more transformational than they otherwise would have thought. And so it's out of that kind of environment that I began to realize that we needed to think about innovation in business, in organizations, in our own lives differently. The first thing to say is we have to begin with the end. That is to say, when we begin with where we're trying to head, your North Star, however you want to describe that, with a clear sense of purpose. Simon Sinek's great TED Talk, Start With Why. When you have a clear sense of your why and where you're headed, and you've got that North Star, you begin with the end, and you're drawn toward a future that can be imaginative and amazing and possible, even in the midst of terrible circumstances. Viktor Frankl, one of the survivors of the Holocaust, talked about saying yes to life, even when he was in the midst of a place where it didn't look like there was much hope possible. Think about the amazing songs that emerged out of slavery, the spiritual songs that could be lament, and yet they could also turn to an extraordinary vision. One of my favorites is a song that was set to music by Moses Hogan, the great African-American contemporary composer, called "In That Great Getting Up Morning." And I'll tell you, if you listen to that song and you don't have some imagination and some hope and some joy, you don't have blood in your veins. Because then you're beginning with the end and you're envisioning what could be. And it's that yearning and that longing that becomes really powerful. So beginning with the end is when the Israelites get focused in the book of Numbers, and when the second census gets taken, then they know where they're headed. They have an answer to the why question. Now, part of what that entails is a conviction that institutions matter, organizations matter. Now, part of the problem we have is we haven't been thinking about this vibrant sense of culture and traditioning and innovation in a life-giving way. Our metaphors are mechanistic. John Gardner made this point 50 years ago, 60 years ago now, but we're not very good at adapting to it. We like org charts. We like thinking of organizations just as inert things. And so we think mechanistically about them. Well, if you're thinking of it in a mechanistic term, then you think, oh, well, I don't want change. I like things as they are. Change is inevitable. Everything's changing. So Gardner said, we need to switch out our mechanistic metaphors for organizations in favor of organic ones. That organic metaphors suggest, like us as human beings, our organizations are always growing, decaying, changing, adapting. And so we're always thinking about how do we shift and orient ourselves in those ways. Imagine if you're thinking about that in organic terms, where do we prune? Where do we invest? How do we grow well? My wife and I didn't buy a house once for the sole reason that it had way too big a rose garden. Because I'm horrible. I don't know what the term for a thumb is that like immediately kills things it touches, but that's me. We tried to take a lesson once just to see if we could learn. And the master gardener took me to a rose bush and said, cut that there. I said, there's a rose at the end of that. I said, I don't want to cut that. She said, cut it. I said, this isn't right. And she said, if you only prune things that are already dead, you're not really pruning. That's just cutting off dead things. Pruning means you're going to cut some things that are fine in order to enable a greater flowering. So I cut it because she told me to. We came back about a month later, and sure enough, much greater flowering. Any organization that's practicing tradition to innovation is going to say, well, that's okay, but that's really part of the past and not where we need to be going. Even if it's healthy now, it's not at the core of where we want to go. So you lean into the future, you begin with the end, you learn from the traditioning and the past in ways that enable that kind of creativity into the future. Then you think about the past. It's about two words, gratitude and wisdom. Gratitude and wisdom. Gratitude is to say, we're here because some other people took risks. We're here because other people gave us a vision, and we ought to be grateful for that. I give thanks for Susan Heron and Ida Hood, because if it hadn't been for their kind of reckless imagination, Belmont University wouldn't exist. If Jack Massey hadn't helped keep Belmont afloat in the 1960s and 1970s, Belmont might not have survived. Gratitude for those who've gone before us is part of that traditioning process. Even if you're the founder of a company, and you think you're the only person who's ever had that idea, think with gratitude at all those people who poured into your education to give you the ideas that you eventually had to start it. That sense of gratitude for those who have gone before us, who have helped make our life possible. And that sense of wisdom is a sense of being able to distinguish what is it that's traditionalist and what's tradition. How do we discern what's the best way forward? You need that sense of wisdom to be able to appropriate the past well and to make good judgments as we go forward. You know, thinking in construction, you know, you don't just make stuff up. My favorite architect that I worked with 20 years ago, he said, too many people want to just build and design cutting edge buildings of their time. We like to build timeless buildings of their place. And they were incredibly innovative in that process. Those of you with R.C. Matthews, I mean, part of the beauty of Belmont's campus is the integration of the whole campus and that consistency that comes drawing on the past in really innovative ways. Wait till you see the Performing Arts Center. It draws together past and future in incredible ways, and that takes wisdom. I could take you to lots of buildings that have been built with a lack of any wisdom, and they're ugly. Joseph Stalin built a whole bunch of them in Russia. If you want to, first time I went to Russia and I heard about Stalin, I'd heard Stalinist architecture all my life. When you actually see what he built, that's to give it too much praise. I mean, it's just horrific because there was no wisdom. So when you're thinking about the future, it's awe and wonder. When you think about the past, it's gratitude and wisdom. In the present, it's trust and generativity. So the underlying seventh virtue that I just want to close with is love. If you're shaped by love, you'll discover trust and generativity. You'll cultivate gratitude and wisdom, and it'll inspire awe and wonder. And it's actually something that can be as relevant in your most high-powered for-profit business, as in a university, as in a family, or any other setting. One final story from a football team in Baltimore, coached by a guy named Joe Ehrman, who was a 14-time All-Pro defensive end for the Baltimore Colts back when they were in Baltimore, when the Colts were in Baltimore. After he retired, he went into youth ministry, and he also started coaching a football team at Gilman High School. And they were a weird team, and so a reporter from the Washington Post went out because he wanted to find out what was going on. And he goes out because he heard about these weird practices. And so Coach Ehrman had gathered all the players around during preseason, and he said, "What's your job as players?" They all said, "To love each other." And he said, "What's our job as coaches?" I said, "To love us." This reporter, Jeffrey Marks, is writing this down going, this is bizarre. Now, this wasn't because they were like the Bad News Bear football team, where they were so hapless, they said, well, let's love each other and be nice. They were a top 10 team in the Mid-Atlantic region. They regularly send lots of kids to Division I football programs with scholarships. But he had a deeper understanding of what it meant to cultivate a community and organization and to enable it to flourish. One of the moms came up at the end of the preseason and said to coach, the coach said, how do you think the boys are going to do? And the coach said, we probably won't know for 10 years. Moms want to know wins and losses. But the coach was playing a long game, thinking about what kind of people we're helping to cultivate. I think we live in a time of bewilderment where people are looking for that sense of investment in the future, of a sense that's shaped by love, by what we care about, that why, that can draw us into new opportunities. It can help us flourish, it can help our organizations flourish, it can help our communities and the broader world flourish. And that's what I hope we'll all be about together.